Hello, QVS US History students. This is week 4 of Essential Unit 1, and I wanted to talk to you today about what you need to do during this week in order to end the unit. You will see as you move from unit to unit that every one of them is pretty much structured the same way, and that there is 3 weeks of instruction and 1 week for preparation for the unit test, and also some extra time to finish up any week 1 through 3 activities that you may not have been able to complete within the context of that time period. So let me take you to the course page, let me show you around, and let me talk about what your responsibilities are for this week. So going back to Essential Unit 1, again, you can see that the time period that we're covering is from about 1492 to 1783. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through the chapter textbook sections. A lot of the activities that I had you do over the course of the first 3 weeks references the textbook. And as you already heard, there were activities throughout week 1 through 3 that I call required for mastery, which are created really in order to prepare you for the content on the unit test. Hopefully by this point in time, you are near the end of week 2, if not completely done with week 3. However, I know a lot of you joined the course later in the quintile or later in the year. So you might still be on week 1 and week 2 activities, and we'll figure out a way to get you caught up slowly over time. But if you work swiftly this week, you might be able to do it without having to borrow some time from other units, and I would highly encourage to do that. Last week in week 3, you examined the causes of the American Revolution. So the purpose was for you to see both the long-term and the short-term issues that led to the American colonies from revolting against the British. One of the most important pieces within last week was the activity on the Declaration of Independence. So you had to examine different features of the Declaration to really draw some conclusions as to what were the grievances of the colonists. So that was in the first activity last week with the causes of the American Revolution. And then you looked a little bit more closely to the series of taxes that were put in place prior to the outbreak of war. Events like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party, you examined those as causes of the revolution. You considered the influences of the Enlightenment. So how did philosophers like John Locke and Montesquieu and Voltaire and Rousseau and their ideas, how did they influence the revolution? Thomas Paine was another important feature with his writing on common sense that largely kind of planted the seed in the minds of Americans that revolution was something that should happen at that time. Then as you move toward the end of the week, you looked at the divisions that existed within the country as it pertained to loyalists and patriots, the percent of the population that supported war versus those who actively supported the British Crown. As you look at different documents related to the revolution, you will see that the population was split by a third patriots, a third loyalists, and a third who essentially could be swayed either way. And in the case of the American Revolution, the patriot cause gained a lot of strength or conscripted a lot of those people in order to support their cause. And then the last activity from last week, you went through the course of the war. So essentially in this activity, if I open it up right now, I gave you a little crash course video where you could listen to the details related to the American Revolution, and then brought you through phase by phase so that you can consider what was happening in the American colonies during each phase of the war. The war began in 1775, notably so a year before the Declaration of Independence was issued. And then it followed through until 1783 when the Treaty of Paris was signed. Technically, the war ended in 1781, and throughout the course of the war, there were some definite disadvantages that the colonists faced. Through the course of this activity, you had to consider those disadvantages that they faced. But one of the most important turning points of the war that occurred in 1778 was the Battle of Saratoga. And after the colonists defeated the British during this battle, which took place in the state of New York, the French joined in the cause of revolution and supported the colonists with their war against England. When the French joined in that cause, it really kind of tipped the balance in the favor of the American colonists, and by 1781 they were able to defeat the British. You can watch a video, or you watched a video here about the Treaty of Paris that was signed after the war. So that was the last activity from week 3. If you haven't gotten to it yet, I encourage you to kind of move toward that so that you can enter week 4. Week 4 is the testing week, and there are a couple things that you need to do this week depending on what grade that you want to secure for the unit. In week 4, you will take a test. In the Essential Unit 1 test, I'll click on it, but you can't open the test until after you upload this assignment, The Course of the War. But I will click on it and open it up and introduce it to you. Essentially, it says, the material covered on this test will be coming from weeks 1 through 3. You have 60 minutes to take the test. So once you click attempt test, then there will be a timer that will start, and you have to finish the test within the context of that 60-minute period. So I would encourage you to make sure that you are somewhere comfortable, somewhere where you have a good internet connection, and somewhere where you know that you're going to need 60 minutes in order to finish this assignment. There are 36 multiple choice questions and 2 like short answer questions. I have short essay here, but they're more like short answer questions. You have 2 attempts to take the test, but you do have to wait a period of time between the first attempt and the second attempt. So make sure that you are that you understand that point. I want you to study in between the 2 test scenarios just in case you need multiple attempts to take it. Okay, so that's the Essential Unit 1 test. The test window is from September 28th through October 4th, so you can take it anytime during that week. However, if you plan on engaging in the A-level activity for this unit, you are going to want to take the test maybe somewhere midweek. I would say set Wednesday as a deadline for yourself so that you have Thursday and Friday of the school week to work on the A-level activity. The A-level activity looks lengthy, but the most challenging part will actually be the essay that I'm having you write. This little introductory activity is just that. It shouldn't take you longer than about 10-15 minutes. And same with the forum at the end. Essentially, you'll be able to take what you had written in the essay and paste it into the forum, because my goal is to see whether or not there's agreement among you and your classmates in terms of whether or not the American Revolution was justified. So if I open this first part of the A-level activity, there's some directions here, and I can kind of like quickly go through them with you. It says if you want to be considered for A-level, you must do the following. I want you to weigh the case for war. There are 6 principles in just war theory, and of the 6 principles, I want you to explain to me which one most justified war and which one least justified war between the colonists and the British. You're going to present your analysis in a 5-paragraph essay, and then you will participate in the forum that I mentioned prior. So if we open up this activity, I just kind of can walk you through it really quickly. You may never have heard of just war theory, and that's the purpose of this activity here. So there's a little bit of an introduction. This is a very famous woodcut by Paul Revere. You already saw this in one of the earlier assignments that I gave you. It is illustrating the Boston Massacre. However, this is a piece of propaganda that existed during the American Revolution to gain fervor from or among the colonists for war. If the war was based on the Boston Massacre alone, a lot of historians and a lot of students of history would have a hard time justifying the war based on this incident alone, especially when you learn about the background activities leading up to the Boston Massacre and the fact that General Preston here did not tell his men to fire. In fact, the wood carving in its totality is not even presenting what happened on that evening in the correct manner. So I open this activity with an illustration from that famous wood carving, and then I'd encourage you to go on. So there's a short little video here, I think it's about 5 minutes, where Michael Walzer, a philosopher on the theory of just war, presents to you the different principles. If we move on to page 3, there's a short outline of the different principles. So these are the 6 that we're going to largely focus on: whether or not there was a just cause, whether or not the colonists had the right authority and the right intention, was there a reasonable chance of success, for proportionality, and last resort. So those are the different principles of just war. If we move on, I give you a further distinction between the two. And going further from there, a little sorting activity for you to distinguish between the 9 categories. And then this is the important part, because here I have formulated some questions for you to help you really consider, of the 6 principles, which one most justified war and which one least justified war. So I would encourage you to read through each of these questions that I have for each of the 6 principles in order to constitute the basis for your essay that you are going to write. And then going on to the next page, again, I outline your task for you. And then on the last page, some resources that you can use as you are developing your argument. After you've decided which of the 2 principles you want to focus on in your essay, it's time to write. I'm looking for a standard 5-paragraph essay where your first paragraph can be an introduction. You should contextualize the period, so tell me about the time period. You could write 1 paragraph on the principle that most justifies war, 1 paragraph on the principle that least justifies. Your 4th paragraph can be an analysis of the 2, and then in your 5th paragraph, a conclusion. And then what that takes us to is this final activity where you open the forum and you add to the forum the principle that you think most justified war. Not the entire paper, just the paragraph that you wrote on the principle that most justified war. And you could do that by adding the discussion topic there. Then, of course, like all forums, I do want you to respond to at least 2 of your classmates. So make sure that you do that within, if not within the context of the week, within the context of the following week. Okay, so that's it. How we are going to finish Essential Unit 1. I wish you good luck. I encourage you to contact me if you have any questions within the week. I am happy to help. Have a good week.